Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel and I'm a professor of migration studies. Today I'm going to talk about remittances, but specifically where remittances are going and where they're coming from. So if you still need to understand the basics of remittances, or in this case I'm talking mainly about financial remittances, meaning the money that migrants are sending back to their families, their households, and communities in their countries of origin, please have a look at another one of my videos where I cover the basics. So right now I'm going to talk about where remittances are going. And here in this infographic from the World Bank, we're looking at remittance flows from 2017, and you can see where remittances are going on a regional level. So what you can see very clearly here is that the majority of remittances, or the largest part of remittances, are actually going to East Asia and the Pacific. So in 2017, this was around 130 billion. Now it's increased a bit, but I liked this infographic from 2017 and the rankings haven't changed, so I kept it here for you. And in second place, we also have South Asia with about 117 billion dollars in remittances in 2017. So very clearly, South Asia and East Asia, the Pacific, major receivers of remittances. Of course, we also have Latin America and the Caribbean that are also important receivers of remittances, the Middle East and North Africa, and as well as Europe and Central Asia. And this is, of course, when we're looking mainly at low and middle income countries because of the particular development impacts and poverty alleviating impacts that remittances can have. Now, this was kind of in absolute terms. Let's look at how this has changed over time. So if we look at growth of remittances by these different regions, again, this is information from the World Bank, you can see that the regions with the highest growth rates, at least in 2018 and 2019, are actually a little bit different. So Latin America has stayed very strong in growth of remittances, both in 2018 and 2019. If we look at South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, they had very strong growth in 2018, but a little bit less strong growth in 2019. The region that seems to be growing the least in both periods is the Middle East and North Africa, although there is still some growth. And in Europe and Central Asia, we saw quite a bit of growth in 2018, and that seems to have slowed down in 2019. It's still important to note that in all regions we do see growth, just some regions seem to be growing more with regard to receiving remittances than others. And here we still have Latin America, the Caribbean, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa as very strong growth areas. Now let's look at the top recipients of remittances in 2019. I'm first going to look at this in absolute terms, so really just an absolute amount of US dollars. And then I'll look at this relatively, so as a percentage of GDP of that country. So again, this is information from the World Bank. The World Bank does a lot of work on both migration and remittances, but especially there's a strong focus on remittances. So if you're interested to know more, have a look there, but I'll also add some links in the description. So first, let's look at remittances in absolute terms. So where are remittances going? So where are these financial flows going in the world? So in the top two spots, we had India and China, followed by Mexico, the Philippines, Egypt, Nigeria, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Ukraine. And over the years, these countries have changed places a little bit, but I would say especially the top four, the top five have stayed pretty consistent over the years. We always see India, China, Mexico, Philippines in the top countries that are receiving remittances globally in absolute terms. Now, if we look at this in relative terms, so looking at remittances as a percentage of GDP, we actually see that the countries look completely different as to which countries are actually receiving the most remittances. So here you see in the first place we have Tonga, followed by Haiti, Nepal, Tajikistan, the Kyrgyz Republic, Honduras, El Salvador, Comoros, Samoa, and the West Bank and Gaza. So what we see here is that actually for quite a few of these countries, remittances are making up a quarter or a third of GDP. So when we actually talk about what countries are being the most impacted by remittances, it's more these countries than the countries that are often focused on that receive remittances in absolute terms. So we talk a lot about China, India, Mexico, the Philippines, but perhaps from an effects perspective, we should be discussing more Tonga, Haiti, Nepal, Tajikistan. So this gives you a better idea of really where we're seeing remittances being effective, or where they're having the largest effect. But now, where are remittances coming from, especially when they're going to low and middle income countries? Here I have another infographic from the World Bank, and what you can see very clearly here is that about a quarter of remittances are actually coming from the United States. So a quarter of all remittances nowadays to low and middle income countries are coming from the United States. But another third are actually coming from GCC countries, or Gulf cooperation countries, so a lot of Gulf countries. That is surprising sometimes to people, but if you've already watched my video on where migrants are coming from and where they're going, then maybe you're not so surprised here, because you'll know already that a large number of migrants are also going to GCC countries. So perhaps that's not as surprising for those of you who've checked out that other video. Then in the third place, we see the Eurozone. So about 12% of remittances that are being sent worldwide to low and middle income countries are actually coming from the Eurozone. And then you see still Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom playing a key role here, and then other countries making up about 28% of the remittances that are being sent globally nowadays. If we don't look at this so much by regions, or we don't aggregate it as much, we can look at the top 10 countries sending remittances in absolute terms in 2017. Again, this is information from the World Bank. As I already told you, we have the United States in the first place. Then we have the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Germany, the Russian Federation, China, Kuwait, France, and Qatar. So again, if you have seen my video on where migrants are going and where they're coming from, particularly if you look at where they're going to, the remittance sending from those countries is quite indicative of where migrants are going. So this is in absolute terms. If we look at this, though, in relative terms, I'm sorry I don't have as up-to-date information here. This is also from the World Bank, but from 2014. You can see that if we look at remittances as a percentage of the GDP of the countries where it is coming from, then we have countries like Luxembourg, Liberia, the Marshall Islands, Oman, Lebanon, Kuwait, the Maldives, Malta, Bahrain, the Kyrgyz Republic, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates who are on this list. Now, interestingly, we do have a couple of countries that are both on the absolute top and the relative top. So still we have Saudi Arabia and UAE, for instance, as key important countries in absolute terms, but also in relative terms. What you see here in relative terms is that in general, the countries that are higher up on this list are generally smaller, richer countries, where that attract a lot of migrants and a lot of remittances are leaving those countries. If we look at remittance corridors, what a corridor means is remittances going from one country to another country. I think this is also quite interesting. I'm showing you here another graph from the World Bank, actually from the World Bank Migration and Remittances Factbook from 2016. We see some interesting things here as far as the top 10 corridors are concerned. So the top corridor internationally by far is the corridor of remittances going from the United States to Mexico. That's interesting, and it's also maybe not surprising because the largest migration corridor in the world is from Mexico to the United States in absolute terms, meaning that the largest absolute number of migrants in the world from one country to another is actually Mexicans in the United States. Then in the next place we see here for remittance corridors of remittances going from the United States to China. And then we have a number of other countries. What's interesting is that already in these top countries of corridors, we see that some countries are represented regularly. So we see that the US, more than any other country, is represented in these top corridors of remittances being sent from the United States to, for instance, Mexico, China, India, the Philippines, Vietnam, Guatemala, and Nigeria. There are a few other countries that also show up here multiple times. So we have China showing up multiple times. We have India showing up multiple times. And we do also have some countries that we see showing up both as a remittance sender and as a remittance receiver. So have a look at this. I think it's interesting to get a better idea really of where these global money flows are going. So I hope this video gave you a better idea of where remittances are coming from, where they're going to, and maybe started to give you a small glimpse of where remittances might be having the most impact. Stay tuned though for other videos that will be coming shortly, looking specifically at the effects of remittances, particularly on things like poverty and inequality. That will be coming on my channel. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. Remember, I'll definitely give you more information and links down in the description, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.